Over the last few days, we've seen pictures on social media of packed aeroplanes flying around the United States. What is your sense of how quickly demand for aviation is going to return in the U.S.?
Well, thanks, Guy, and it's great to be with you all. Well, the demand is still very, very modest. We're seeing very gradual improvements in air traffic. Our load factor last week was probably around 20% at best. So there are, at least on Southwest, we're not booking our airplanes full anyway to allow for physical distancing on the airplane. So you won't see a full airplane. The good news is we are beginning to see a recovery. Our government has asked us to remain open for business throughout, so we've never shut down, but we have reduced a lot of our flights. We're working with the government to hopefully implement temperature screenings so that we don't have ill passengers getting into the airport and onto airplanes. We've got a number of cleaning procedures that we've implemented. Hand sanitizers are available. We're asking customers and employees to wear masks. We have HEPA filters on board the aircraft, creating hospital quality air. So there's a number of things that are being done. It's a multi-layered approach to make the environment just as safe as we can possibly make it.
Gary, as you say, like load factors in the 20s is not something that is ultimately sustainable. How long do you think it is going to take to get load factors back up to the level at which most routes are viable, most legs are viable? And do you think ultimately that some routes are not going to be viable at the kind of load factors and seat densities that you are probably going to have to live with for quite some time?
Well, taking air traffic worldwide as a whole, I think we'll see, because we're in a recession, we're going to see a very gradual return of business traffic. That's very typical in a recessionary environment, and that's exactly what we've got. You were talking about international travel earlier. I think international travel is also going to be very slow to return. So I think it will be years before we get back to 2019 traffic levels. In terms of the consumer, historically in recessions, consumers do travel. They watch their budgets. They'll be looking for low fares. Of course, I do think that low fare carriers like Southwest will see more demand in an environment like this. But I think overall it will take several years for the traffic to recover.
Which routes will you lose without more aid or drawing down more from the federal budget that you can apply for? You're already receiving $3.2 billion and you can apply for an additional 2.8. But what are your scenarios, Gary? What routes are you thinking might be the first to go?
And with the $3.2 billion under the CARES Act that you mentioned, it's important to note that all that money is earmarked to our employees, and even that doesn't cover our payroll through September the 30th. Well, at this point, we're still serving all of our domestic destinations that we were serving before the crisis. We don't have any international service points right now because that's being restricted. We don't have any plans to close any destinations, and all of the itineraries that we had before, with the exception of the international, are still available. I think we just have to see how demand recovers. We're the largest airline in the U.S. In terms of domestic seats, and we're going to do everything we can to preserve jobs and continue to serve our communities very well.
Now, you were offering early retirement, extended leave in June. Already about 10,000 workers have taken voluntary leave or partial pay options. How much more cutting and pruning do you need to do in order to carry on, as you just said, Gary?
Well, at this point, I don't think an airline can be too small, if you know what I mean. So anything that we can do to reduce the consumption of resources, I think will be helpful, certainly here in the near term. We haven't offered early retirement yet, but I do plan to do that, and we'll be introducing that in June. So all voluntary options for people to exit the airline. We'll be exploring, and that I think we'll want to continue that well into next year.
Gary, can I just take you back to what you said a few moments ago about the low-cost carriers likely to see a disproportionate amount of demand coming back? Do you think consumers are going to be price sensitive? Do you think there'll be some elasticity here, i.e. lower fares will drive higher demand? Or do you think that passengers will be looking for other factors such as you say, social distancing, maybe priority boarding, these kinds of factors?
Well, obviously what is so unique is that this is a pandemic. We haven't seen anything like this in our lifetime. And that does demand that until people are comfortable that the virus is under control with therapeutics, with vaccines, that absolutely will need to be, our society will need to continue to have these kinds of precautions with social distancing and with cleaning, with masks, hand sanitizers. All of those things will need to continue. At some point, we'll get past the pandemic. At some point, I believe we'll get back to a more normal condition, but I don't see that happening for quite some time. So more than a low fare will be required, you're right. But in addition to all those other things, low fares are absolutely fundamental in an environment like this, and especially since I would expect business travel to be so weak.
One of the other factors that is so critical to an LCC, a low-cost carrier, is a turnaround time. You want to have your aircraft in the air, you want them to be flying. Obviously, that's not a factor right now, but nevertheless, as you've indicated, there are going to be a whole load of extra precautions that are likely to be in place that are going to slow your whole schedule down. What's the kind of network effect of that likely to be, and how does that change the kind of route economics that you're looking at the moment?
Well, right now we're able to handle all these activities, as you point out, because the passenger load factors are so modest. But we're very efficient. I think that we can do the cleanings in between flights very efficiently, and we already had a number of initiatives underway to improve the efficiency of our turn process. So I think you'll still find that Southwest is superior in all ways when it comes to efficiency, and especially with the turn at the airport.
What can you do, Gary, to inspire confidence in Wall Street and the investor class again, particularly after Warren Buffett said he was pulling out, that being the death knell for a lot of investors, even if you don't necessarily agree with Warren Buffett's thesis?
Well, as usual, you have to have a compelling story, and then you have to deliver. So we'll need to show results. Right now, we're at the bottom of the trough, so I think everybody understands that coming out of March, April was not going to be a good month. May is not much better, although we are seeing some improvements. And we just need to continue to have steady progress. In the meantime, we tell all of our people and all of our investors certainly that we've cut our spending by billions of dollars this year, and that austerity program will need to continue into the future until we get back to prosperity. We'll want to have as an objective to pay down debt and just make sure that we are running a very, very efficient, low-cost operation until the revenue environment is repaired.
So all of your preparations seem predicated on revenue coming back, even if it's 5 years down the road. If it doesn't, Gary, or if it takes longer than that, or if there are just too many airplane seats looking for too few customers, is there a round of consolidation that takes place? What would be the tipping point for you to consider something like that?
Well, I think all that, again, is premature, and right now we're just making sure that we keep Southwest healthy and that we survive this crisis. How long it takes to survive, I think, is the essence of your question, and then what techniques will we need to not just survive but then thrive are all open. We acquired AirTran Airways in 2010, so obviously we've proven that it's something that we're willing to do and able to do. That's not the preferred course at this point, but yeah, I think you make an excellent point that in this kind of an environment, if in fact travel demand is lower, there very well could be some consolidation. If so, we want to be prepared for that. But right now, we're just doing everything we can to minimize our spending, focus on safety, focus on the health, and then make sure we
Yes.
have plenty of cash, and we've done all of those things.